Where do I even begin with this one? When the Sega Saturn came out, the world thought that was where we would get our first mainline Sonic game, no matter how obscure. You know what we got? Sonic 3D Blast. A good game, but it's not 3D. I don't care how much Sega tried to convince us this game was 3D. It's not 3D, okay? Then we got Sonic R. While it was a 3D Sonic game, it's a spin-off. So, we technically got a spin-off Sonic 3D game before we got a mainline. Technically, we also got Sonic Jam and Sonic the Fighters, however, Sonic Jam is a collection, so I didn't even cover it, and Sonic the Fighters is an arcade game. So, up until 1999 or 1998 in Japan, the world did not get a mainline Sonic game. You need to keep in mind that at that point, Super Mario 64 had been out for quite a while. I know that Sega always seems to be behind Nintendo when it comes to game releases, but still, not releasing a true 3D Sonic game and trying to pass Sonic 3D Blast as 3D was embarrassing. But there was still hope that when Sega's big 3D Sonic game on the Sega Dreamcast came out, the wait would be worth it. Of course, meanwhile, Sonic Team is out developing Sonic Adventure, and when I say out, I really mean it. These guys went on a little world adventure of their own to find inspiration for their first 3D Sonic game. So in 1998, the game was finally announced at a Japan demo that I probably won't find confirmable footage for. Anyway, I had to go to great lengths to find an original copy of Sonic Adventure for this original Dreamcast. I absolutely did not go onto Steam and buy the game for $8. I actually went to eBay and purchased a copy of the original Dreamcast game for like $1,000 or something. Okay, but in all seriousness, before I start this review, there are a few things you should know about. The Steam version of the game is a piece of garbage, so I used the Dreamcast conversion mod to fix it up and make it a bit more like the original game. Oh yeah, it also made it widescreen, so that was cool too. And for all you critics out there who think that it can't be the original game if it's modded, I personally went through every single mod, and if the mod changed anything major about the game experience, I disabled it. Though after checking every mod, I didn't need to disable anything. All the mods just changed the appearance of the game to make it look like the Dreamcast version. Everything else is just cosmetic stuff, like the ability to play as Super Sonic in levels after beating the base game. But that doesn't affect the actual game. I only changed one thing about the actual story experience, and that's the music for the Perfect Chaos fight. I changed it so that Open Your Heart plays after the other song instead of before. If you want my opinion on the original music placement in the fight, I hate it. I've always wanted it swapped. Thank goodness for the mod. Anyway, I'm gonna stop rambling and review the game already. So for this video, I will be reviewing every story individually, just because that's what makes the most sense for me. Now, the game is divided into 7 campaigns: Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, Big, E102 Gamma, and Super Sonic. They all have their own playstyles. Obviously, Sonic's story is the best one. This game is called Sonic Adventure. Sonic's controls consist of the spin dash, jump, light dash, and a few other controls that aren't super important. That's right, there's no dash. I was surprised too. No, really, when I first played this game a while ago, I thought it would control like forces or generations. Boy, was I surprised. Speaking of which, I know this is a detour, but I forgot to tell this story earlier. So the reason I picked up Sonic Adventure is kind of a funny story. I used to be really into the earlier Archie Sonic comics because I would get volumes of Sonic Archives from my local library. Well, I read Sonic Archives volume 21, I think, and it happened to be the Sonic Adventure adaptation. Well, in the back of the volume, there was an ad for Sonic Adventure on Xbox 360, and since you can buy Xbox 360 games on Xbox One, I looked on the Microsoft Store, and sure enough, there it was, and it was only like $5. You better believe I bought it. Anyway, Sonic's gameplay. It's kind of hard to give a modern example to compare Sonic Adventure's controls to because they're pretty unique. They're also kind of hard to explain, so why not just buy a copy of Sonic Adventure off Steam? It's only like $8. Anyway, lots of games at this time like to experiment and test a bunch of gameplay styles and features. There are some entire story modes that are a result of that, but thankfully, Sonic doesn't really have any bad levels. In fact, why don't we go through his levels right now? Emerald Coast. If you don't like this level, you don't like Sonic. I'm not sorry. This level is a perfect introduction to Sonic's controls and just a fun level to come back to, even if you're a pro. Also, of course, it has this iconic shot of Sonic being chased by the killer whale in this scene. Windy Valley. This level is also great. I thought for sure this level would be awful because it's in the sky. Sky levels do not have a great reputation in the Sonic franchise, especially if bottomless pits are involved. This level, however, is great to play because all the bridges over bottomless pits have rails so you don't fall off. Also, the platforming over bottomless pits is always fair and even fun. Casinopolis. I'm gonna say it right now. I don't like how this level is designed. I always liked how this level looked, but the way you play it is just bad. Instead of being a high-speed action stage, the level is a challenge to get as many rings as possible. How do you do this? You play pinball, obviously. Look, I don't have anything against pinball, but this is not a pinball game. It's just really irritating that this is also the level that took me the longest. And of course, the part of it that you actually get to run around in and play through is in the sewers. So you don't even get the casino scenery except in the hub of the level. Thankfully, the next level's awesome. Ice Cap. I'm not 100% certain if this is supposed to be the same Ice Cap from Sonic 3, but it would make sense if it is. The level's pretty good. I think the only part I don't like about it is the parts where you jump between icicles. But these parts are short. The part at the end where you snowboard down the mountain away from the avalanche is so much fun to play. It almost feels like an apology for how bad the intro for Ice Cap from Sonic 3 was. But anyway, this level's great. Twinkle Park. This stage is pretty much divided in two halves. One half is dedicated to the race course, and the other is just a traditional Sonic Adventure level. I do kind of like the car part, but I do wish that more of the level was, on foot. Also, I've never really liked how the cars control. I don't know what it is, it just feels awkward to me. The actual level part is great though. It's yet another example of a good balance between platforming and speed. Speed Highway. I'm pretty sure everybody knows this stage. The funny thing is that I've known about this stage for a long time, but I didn't know what game it was from for the longest time. This level is yet again a great combination of platforming and speed, and yeah, there's a lot of speed. You spend a lot of this stage running through loops and blasting through platforming segments. I only have one complaint about this stage, and that's the last segment. I don't like it. Not only does it have the weakest platforming, but it just doesn't fit in at all with the rest of the stage. I honestly don't know why it's here. It almost feels like they took the Knuckles stage, this area, and threw it on top of the Sonic stage for no reason other than to make it longer. Red Mountain. This is a great level. That's all I really have to say about it. My only real problem with it is that it has the least memorable music, and it has a hair too much platforming. In fact, it might be one of the weaker stages in the game in general. Still a great stage, though. Skydeck. I used to hate this stage. I think for a long time, I just had this massive bias against any Sonic Sky level after Altitude Limit from Sonic Rush. That level stinks, by the way. Anyway, Skydeck is a good level, but I do have a few of the same problems with it from the last time I played. First of all, I don't like all the segments that force you to slow down and move across a wall or climb a ladder. Thankfully though, for the wall segments, you can just jump to go faster. It is risky, but it's not super hard. Next, there is one part of the level where you need to get to Pillar 4 to do something. I can't remember. Anyway, this part took me forever the last time I played this. Well, when I replayed the game for this video, I realized Past Me is just dumb because that part's really easy. You just move along the rails in the logical direction. It's not rocket science. I was probably just overthinking it like usual. The last two things are minor. The switchback ramp segments are kind of annoying because they just take forever to go down. And lastly, there are some really bad camera angles in this level that make it occasionally difficult to get past certain parts. Overall, though, the level is great, and I was just bad at it for some reason. Also, the music for this level is really good, maybe the best in the game. I'll get to the music later, though. Lost World. I don't like this level. This is a great example of a level that tricks you into thinking you're going fast by having segments of speed where you do pretty much nothing. When you get to the actual level, it's really slow. For example, the weird snake room. You need to stop and ride this snake around the room to activate switches to open the door. I hate this. I hate having to ride the snake. The one part with the giant ball was pretty funny. Reminded me of Indiana Jones, just like every other rolling ball reference. Anyway, the final room is the worst. You need to press these switches repeatedly to move these platforms in the correct position to scale the wall. This segment is just so boring for me, and if you make a mistake and fall, you need to start over. Not to mention, the camera is at its worst in this segment, especially on the walls. Final Egg. For the 50th time, this is a great example of platforming and speed balance. I don't like a few of the platforming segments because they force you to slow down, but it's never for long. The level is still great and a perfect end to Sonic's story. So, yeah, that's a summary of the levels from Sonic's story. I think it would be logical to talk about the music next because, oh boy, the good music is back, baby! Man, after all those really bad soundtracks in the Game Gear games, it's finally time for some epic tracks. And boy, does this game go hard. With legendary Sonic artist Jun Senoue on the level tracks and Crush 4D on the main theme, this game has one of the most iconic soundtracks in the entire Sonic series. I'm not going to go over all the hub area tracks, but if you're wondering what I think of them, Station Square is good, Mystic Ruin is a little weird, but also good, and Egg Carrier is probably the weakest of the three, but still good. Anyway, Emerald Coast, again, has one of the most iconic tracks in the series. It has two different tunes for different parts of the level, but both are really good. The first one is definitely the best of the two, though. Windy Valley has two tracks as well. The first one is your typical original Sonic Adventure tune. However, the second track is a remake of Green Grove from Sonic 3D Blast for the Sega Genesis. While I like both tracks, I like the second one better just because it matches the feel of the game a little more, in my opinion. Casinopolis has several tracks depending on the area. The best tunes are the ones that play in the hub area for the level, and the Sonic Pinball Machine. I think both tracks match the vibe pretty well, but the Pinball Machine one is slightly better than the hub one. The track that plays in the sewers is the third best one, and it doesn't match the vibe as well as the others. In fact, the entire sewer section feels just a little out of place. But by far the worst track is the Nights into Dreams Pinball Machine track. It does not match the casino setting at all and feels completely out of place. Maybe if I played Nights into Dreams, I would understand the significance of the tune, but I haven't, so I don't. Ice Cap has two tracks. The first one I honestly forgot existed because you can't really hear it over all the sounds in Ice Cap. It does match the setting pretty well though. The second track that plays during the avalanche part of the level goes so hard and is obviously really fun to listen to. Technically, the next track aside from the bosses is the Sky Chase Act 1 track. If you want to know what I think of it, it's kind of memorable, but it's also a little repetitive. In fact, why not I go over the boss tracks very briefly? To be perfectly honest, I can't remember any of the boss tracks aside from the Chaos 6 boss track. They all match the boss and all, but none of them were particularly memorable to me. That's all I'm going to say about that. Twinkle Park has two tracks. The one that plays during the beginning is another direct reference to Sonic 3D Blast. Speaking of which, shout out to JJ Martin6422 for pointing out a few of these music references. I think a few of them were a little off, but his comment made me pay a little more attention to Sonic Adventure's soundtrack. Anyway, the Panic Puppet reference is cool, but the second Twinkle Park track is probably the better of the two. Next, Speed Highway has, you guessed it, two music tracks. The first is awesome, of course. I know this one from Sonic Generations again, but the original still sounds awesome to listen to. The second track in the level, though, not so much. It feels like there's so much energy when you run through Speed Highway's first section, but then this much calmer song plays in the second section. It feels a little off. I don't know, it just breaks the mood for me. Red Mountain probably has the weakest first track in the game. Sure, it's catchy, but it just feels a little slow, I guess. The track that plays in the lava segment's pretty good, though. Skydeck's track could not possibly be better. It begins with this epic guitar segment, and then about a quarter of the way through the track, a musician starts wailing away on what sounds like an organ. This track is so well made, and it fits the environment so well. I think I like it the most out of all the tracks in the entire game. I guess the track changes a little about halfway through the level, but not a whole lot, so I won't play it. Both segments are awesome in my opinion. I honestly don't remember the track for Lost World that well. I remember that it matches the setting pretty well, but I don't know, it's not my favorite. Final Eggs tracks are both good. I don't really have a preference or anything else to say about them really. They are both very well made, well fitting tracks. And that's the music. Let's see here, what else is there? Oh, the bosses. So, most of the bosses are really fun to fight. Obviously, all the Eggman bosses are really fun. You might think the constant battles against Chaos would be boring and repetitive, but they're all different and they bring new ideas to the game. The Egg Viper boss at the end of Sonic's campaign is especially fun. The only boss that I straight up dislike are the rival battles, like when you fight Knuckles. The AI is really bad, and all you need to do is spam the homing attack while moving towards the opponent. Overall, though, the bosses are great. As for the gameplay, I already talked about most of it. There are a few things to mention though, as with most 1999 games. There are a few clip glitches, however, I didn't have any problems with them this last playthrough. I assume that most of the clip glitches come from the GameCube SADX version of the game, but thanks to the Dreamcast conversion mod, most of the worst glitches are gone. I remember dying several times on Emerald Coast the last time I played this game, because I kept clipping through a wall in one of the segments. Wasn't a problem here though. Also the cutscenes. These have got to be the greatest things in the entire series. It is just so funny how bad they are. They always make me laugh. I know this game has some parts that are supposed to be really serious, but it's just so hard to take them seriously with Sonic's mouth moving like that. Speaking of which, the story. I don't know, man. On the surface, the story is pretty simple. Eggman has discovered Chaos, the god of destruction, and he's going to use him to destroy Sonic. Chaos gradually gets more powerful as he gets more Chaos Emeralds. He eventually goes out of control and tries to destroy Station Square, so Sonic goes supersonic and takes him out. There's a little more to it than that, but that's basically what happens. However, the game's cutscenes frequently cut back to the past to talk about a character called Tikal and how Chaos used to be a good guy, but then all the CHAOs die or something, I don't really know. These flashbacks are all scattered across the character stories, so it's a little hard to piece it all together. Here's a more advanced summary. Back in the day, the CHAO lived in peace. But then their echidna neighbors came and tried to steal the Master Emerald, so Chaos kills them all. Yeah. So Tikal imprisons Chaos in the Master Emerald, and Eggman breaks him free in Sonic Adventure. I know I left out quite a lot, like the egg carrier and how this frog grows a tail, but I honestly do not care. If you want to know this overcomplicated story so much, go play the game yourself. So are there gameplay flaws? Yeah. Are there storytelling flaws? Absolutely. But overall, Sonic's story is so much fun, and I'm excited to see what the other characters have to offer. Real quick, I just want to say that as I go through these sections, they will get shorter and shorter. I already covered most of the stuff in Sonic's story, and I don't need the other story sections to be very long. Anyway, Tails' story is like Sonic's story, but with the gimmick of being able to fly. Probably the best example of using this ability is in Windy Valley. You can use your flying power to skip massive parts of the level, and you can use these dash rings to fly faster. This style of play is fun, and it's cool how Tails' flight is now encouraged instead of looking like a cheap way to beat the level faster. Oh yeah, also, you and Sonic are racing to beat the level first. Casinopolis is just playing through the underground portion of the level. This is cool, but I've already said that the underground portion doesn't really match the casino. Still cool though. Ice Cap is like Sonic's story, but just the snowboarding part, which feels a little cheap, but it works. Skydeck is also basically just Sonic's version of the level, but with flying. It works much better here though. Finally, Speed Highway. Speed Highway is Tails' best level, just because the end is cut out of his version, and the flight ability is probably the best utilized in this level. So, I guess it's a tie between Windy Valley and Speed Highway. All the levels are cool though. My only real complaint with Tails' story is that the levels are just a bit too short, but this isn't a huge problem. Also, the problem becomes worse and worse the smaller the campaign gets, but there are a lot of cutscenes in this game. That isn't a huge problem either, but when the campaign is short it becomes kind of annoying, but the cutscenes in Tails' story are great, so it's fine. So Tails' story is almost just as good as Sonic's. What about Knuckles? Knuckles takes on a completely different style of gameplay. Instead of speeding through levels, he uses a tracker to find pieces of the Master Emerald. The gameplay style is fine. I don't have much to say about it. I will say his levels are much more fun to play in Sonic Adventure than in Sonic Adventure 2. I mean, it's not that I don't like the treasure hunting gimmick, it's more that I just like Sonic's speed levels more. Anyway though, I did at least have a little fun playing Knuckles' campaign. I don't think I need to go through the levels because they all felt the same to me. His campaign was decent, and I'll leave it there. Okay, Amy's story. I'm not a huge fan of it. It isn't very long, but it feels like it is because Amy is so slow. Like, she's really slow. Her whole story mode revolves around her getting chased by this robot called Zero. I really like this mechanic, but sometimes it can be annoying. In some areas, you need to slow down and pull a lever or solve a puzzle. However, it can be tricky to do when you have a crazy party escort bot trying to kill you. But yeah, her campaign takes like an hour to beat. It's not like it's a bad campaign necessarily, but I'm not going to go out of my way to play it. It's okay. On to Big. Okay, I'm going to say it right now. I don't understand why people hate Big's campaign so much. Yes, it's out of place, and no, it doesn't belong in a Sonic game, but people will just straight up say that Big's campaign is unplayable. And let me ask you a question. Do you have a basic understanding of how to play video games? I don't understand what is so hard about this. You just need to find Froggy, cast your rod, and when he bites, yank the rod. After that, catching him is easy. The only way I see this being hard is if you have no patience. You see, Big has a tension meter on screen while fishing, and if it reaches the top, you lose your catch. It can be hard to keep from getting too high, but only if you're impatient. Just don't hold down the reel button. Tap it repeatedly without getting the bar too high. His campaign is out of place, fine, but it's not hard at all. It took me about a half an hour to beat, and I've only beaten it once before this. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Gamma's story might be my favorite story aside from Sonic's, ironically. Gamma's levels are focused on defeating as many enemies as you can with his blaster. His laser automatically targets the enemies. This makes destroying several enemies at once quite satisfying. His story is interesting in the sense that we finally get to see the game from Eggman's side a little bit more. That's cool. My only real problem with Gamma's story is that all the bosses aside from the last one are pretty easy. This isn't a huge problem though. Honestly, that's all I have to say about Gamma's campaign. I don't have any big problems with it, and it's really fun. This is the final story in the game, unlocked by beating all the other stories. I don't like the beginning that much because it feels like the developers just decided to dump all the loose end cutscenes into one story. The actual final boss is cool though. I think it's a little annoying how you need to fight the boss in 2 phases, but the phases aren't really any different. Overall though, the final story is a great ending to the game. One problem though, the city's still destroyed. Does Sonic just not care? The game kinda just ends right here. Whatever. Okay, I think that's everything. Now, before I give this final rating of the game, I want to say something. A lot of people rate this game based on nostalgia bias, or they rate it highly just because it's the first 3D Sonic game. I would like to say that I have no such bias. I have presented what I really think about the game, and that will go into the rating. This game gets no free nostalgia points from me. The rating will be my 100% correct, unbiased opinion on the game. With that said, I officially rate the game a 9 out of 10. This game is an easy 9 out of 10. Let's be real here, guys. Come on. Okay, so usually this will be the end of the video, but first I would like to mention something. So a few days ago, I was going through the list of Sonic games, and I realized that I would not be able to play Sonic 06 because I don't have an Xbox 360, and emulation isn't an option for me. The only way to play Sonic 06 for the grind is to buy an Xbox 360 off eBay. Here's the problem. I'm not exactly made of money. I can't just buy a new console when I really need it. So I had to find another solution, and that solution was Patreon. Yeah, I started a Patreon. Okay, so you'll realize fast it isn't really that much extra content, but to be fair, I am very busy, and Patreon is mostly for support. But I still do put scripts, recordings, and other cool stuff on there as well. So if you really like what I do, go support me on Patreon. Trust me, I want to suffer through Sonic 06. I'm very curious.